Okay, then just the text. So they can just do it on a I'm in the Austral. What in the Pacific? Oh, okay. Oh, all right. Okay, so I'll be with you. Okay. Yes. Yes. Okay. Thank you. And then you just can keep it like this, right? Okay. Press okay. But it's not. I don't get the.
Hello. Good morning or good afternoon already. Good afternoon already. So welcome to this conversation that we are going to hold around such a relevant issue as tools for transformation, low emission development strategies. In fact, we know that we can count on a broad engagement towards a low carbon future, even if we may find some difficulties still ahead of us. And we also know that once we have taken a decision on whether we want to be, one of the main challenges is how to arrive there. We need to have been working with 16 national teams on what type of deep decarbonization pathways we could be building in order to ensure that there was a nice, smooth match between the short-term pressing demands and the long-term goals being decided at the national level. And we have learned a lot of things that I guess that could be broadly shared by all of you. Building these scenarios, building these backcasting scenarios do help to identify where the difficulties may be, how to overcome the difficulties, how to identify what type of opportunities may be there also, what type of very concrete, usual things we already know we have to do. So start as soon as possible, invest in energy efficiency, invest in clean energy, and try to organize in a proper, in a nice manner, the phased out strategies, so to get rid of those things we don't need anymore, and the phasing strategies, so to help to build that future that we want to live in the coming years. Of course, all of this is instrumental. Building pathways is not getting engaged on something very concrete, such as we could find in the national regulations, in the national plans, in the national strategies, but it helps to open a discussion on how to combine the different tools ahead of us. For the time being, we've seen the national determined communications coming from the different countries, and we have a very good opportunity that Paris provides to any player, so to develop the low emissions development strategies, trying to combine the different domestic priorities with these goals of building low carbon and resilient futures. Ensure that low emissions transformations should be consistent with the domestic priorities. And we have the great opportunity to discuss all these issues with people that do real, with the real difficulties to get this in place. We will have 2 more people joining us as soon as they can, but for the time being, we've already got 2 very nice and engaged panelists in this adventure of building a low emissions future. Next to my left, we've got Joachim Flashbart, the Secretary of State from the Ministry of Environment in Germany, who has got a very nice good news coming fresh from Berlin in these very last hours. And next to him, there is Jos Delbecque, who has been working on this far before the previous Marrakesh appointment. So also someone being experiencing in a very direct manner the challenges of building Europe towards a different future. I would like to invite them to share with us their own understanding on what does this mean, why this is important, how it can help. Please. So also someone being experiencing in a very direct manner the challenges of building Europe towards a different future. I would like to invite them to share with us their own understanding on what does this mean, why this is important, how it can help.
No, it is not.
Please.
Then I wait.
So, also someone being experiencing in a very
So now, yeah, Teresa, thanks for introducing us. Jos, thanks for joining us here at the IDDRI German side event. And I've experienced a lot of ACs, but not one that is so loud as this one. So I hope I can overshout this with my messages. So now, yeah, Teresa, thanks for introducing us. Jos, thanks for joining us here at the IDDRI German
kind of echo.
side event.
I can hear myself. Oh,
And,
good. Then it's right.
experienced a lot of ACs, but not one that
So
is so loud as this one.
we have invited
So I
for
hope I
this
can
side event on tools for
with my
transformation,
messages.
low emission development strategies. And we have to see this in the context of what we experienced last year. I guess no one in this room here could imagine that only 1 year after Paris, we would gather in Marrakesh with a ratified Paris Agreement. I think 1 year ago, we even were not sure whether we would get an agreement or not. We were hopeful, but we were not sure. And now the ratification process. May I ask the technicians? There is a horrible echo, and okay, that's better.
Maybe it's simply because I didn't say anything. Of course, then there can't be an echo. So we had this wonderful year. We have this wonderful year behind us. It was not only the speedy ratification process and the entry into force prior to the COP here in Marrakesh. We also had the Montreal Protocol amendment regarding the HFCs. We got the decision under ICAO. So a full branch of very positive multilateral in developments with regard to climate change. And the message from all over the world, from the world community, is clear. The message is we want to solve it. We want to solve it together. And we want to achieve what we agreed in Paris to keep the increase of the global temperature beyond 2 degrees with a view also to 1.5 degrees. Now here in Marrakesh, of course, we continue with our negotiations. We have to work on the task we gave ourselves last year in Paris. We have to discuss about implementation, and I think that is the overarching topic here in Marrakesh, also wisely prepared by the Moroccan presidency to focus on how to implement mutually what we agreed in Paris. We are not starting at zero, but we have to enhance our cooperation. The whole process in Paris was organized to be facilitative, and that means that we have to increase our cooperation amongst partners from all over the world. One of the tools Germany, together with Morocco, developed for that is the NDC partnership. I have the feeling that many countries are attracted by this kind of partnership. We will have a special side event on that one tomorrow at 1:15 at the Moroccan pavilion, and of course everybody is invited again. And as we will have this side event, I don't want to spend time now on this topic. At this side event, it's about long-term strategies. Germany dealt with this issue under our G7 presidency. You might remember Elmau, when we got the breakthrough among the G7 partners to commit to a complete decarbonization of the world economy in the course of this century. That is, I have to say, something that was quite unexpected even for us. That we could convince our partners and maybe also ourselves that this is the right way to go. And that was followed afterwards by the language in Paris with the greenhouse gas neutrality. And I remember that there was some confusion in the room at that time. So there were some parties who were reluctant to use the word decarbonization, maybe because they saw decarbonization means to exclude also CCS or something like that. So we ended at greenhouse gas neutrality, which at the end is even more ambitious because it also covers the non-CO2 greenhouse gases, and which means that we have to achieve decarbonization plus a net zero balance of all greenhouse gases. In Paris, we also agreed that parties should develop long-term strategies how to achieve this ultimate goal of the new Paris Agreement. And I feel, of course, all the bits and pieces of the Paris Agreement have their importance, but the long-term strategies, I believe, are in the center of a responsible policy in all our countries. And not only with view to the long term, but also with a view to the short term and the midterm. You easily can make mistakes if you don't have the right orientation for the long term. Just to give you an example, if you look at the traffic sector, I see a colleague of mine from the Ministry of Traffic and Transport in Germany. If you look at the traffic sector and you try to outline a way forward to achieve greenhouse gas neutrality in this sector,
if you stop at the time, let's say for the next 5 or 10 years, you could think about bioenergy, biofuels as a suitable solution for the traffic sector. If you look into the long-term perspective, you will realize that bioenergy, that biofuel might be a bridge technology, but that with biofuel as a solution itself, you will not be able to achieve greenhouse gas neutrality. And therefore, you have right in time to develop strategies to overcome also the time after the time of bridge technologies. That is the reason why we believe that long-term strategies are so important. When we talk about long-term strategies, in the center of the debate, you always have the question how to organize a transformational process in a smoothly way. And we do have tons of studies that outline that a decarbonization of our economies has a positive net impact on our economies with regard to growth rates, with regard to jobs. But it's very important not only to look at the net balance for the total economy, but also to look at individuals at the individual level. What happens with jobs, with economies that are under transformation? And I think it is very important for the political debate to have this very clear. In New York, we decided, or the frame over our 2030 agenda is, we will leave nobody behind. And this is not only true with regard to the development policy we do, it's also true for the policies we provide in our own countries. If we organize the transformation process in a way that people feel, I'm left behind, then they will follow those illiberal forces that we can observe all over the world at the moment. And that is the reason why we in Germany believe that an early start into long-term strategies is of utmost importance. Last week, Germany got a fossil of the day here. Yeah, it is as it is, because we failed last week to meet the time frame for our cabinet decision on our German long-term strategy. The message was understood. Now we have a long-term strategy. The cabinet decided. 2 hours ago, we got a decision by all our ministers and the chancellor to adopt our 2050 climate action plan. And of course, we are now looking forward to the positive prize. We certainly will win for that. We just outline a few words before I finished on our plan. You will have a short version in English, I think in the course of the day on our website. And of course, we will also provide the long version. The first and maybe most important issue under our climate action plan for 2050 is that the German government committed itself already for 2050 to achieve more or less greenhouse gas neutrality. And I think it's a very important signal as one of the leading industrialized economies to already now commit not only for the further future, but also for mid-century to achieve greenhouse gas neutrality. The second one is we decided to phase out fossil energy structures such as coal, oil, and later on also gas, fossil gas, right in advance to 2050, because it's impossible to achieve 2050 greenhouse gas neutrality if you still count on fossil energy sources. That means that by 2050, the whole German economy will be fully renewable, as we decided not to use nuclear. The logic behind our decision is that we will base all our industrial processes as well as all the private consumption completely on renewables. The next point is that we, the first time in Germany, described
a pathway for the different sectors to 2050. In some areas, it's quite clear already now. We know the technologies, we know how to do it. We have to set the right frame, but in principle, we know what to do, and that is, for example, the energy sector. In other sectors, it's more complicated. Look into the different industry branches, for example, steel. It's very difficult to decarbonize a steel production. In these areas, our plan, I have to say, is still a little bit foggy. We know where we want to be. We know in principle how to do it, but we don't have the exact technologies right now. And that is an area where we have to enhance our cooperation with other partners. Or look into the concrete sector. We don't know how to have greenhouse gas neutral concrete, but we are building the world. The whole building stock of the world in the next decades, another time. We will double our building stock. Imagine how much concrete we will need for that. And already now, the concrete production has a carbon footprint of the whole air traffic. So it's not marginal what we are talking about. And there are the areas we have to invest in research and development. Finally, the first time we decided on sectoral targets for 2030. That was maybe one of the most difficult decisions, and all the sectors were against it at the beginning of the discussion. But we said we have to split the 55% we want to decrease our carbon emissions by 2030. We have to split this into sectoral targets so that the traffic sector, the agriculture, industry, energy, and buildings know what they have to do, what they have to achieve. How they are going to do it, that's the matter of these sectors, but at least we provided them a budget for the rest emissions they can use in 2030. A last point, of course, this is not a document forever. We provided the first approach how to decarbonize a country like Germany. We know that we have to learn a lot on that, so we will revisit our climate action plan for 2050 every few years, right in line with provisions of the Paris Agreement and stocktake and increase of ambition in cycles. So we hope that we can provide with our experiences also some useful information for our partners. Thank you.
So at least a warm clap to counteract this Fossil of the Day award that you got last year, because really you deserve a nice prize. So you're the today. So I get 3 or 4 key words in your speech. First, this notion of neutrality, coming back to this successfully approach from 2015. This notion of transformational challenges that you try to cover in your strategy. This sectoral approach, so to find ways to provide information that can orientate any type of decision. And this check against reality that you intend to preserve all along the time, knowing that things can evolve. But this is still something that deserves some flexibility in order to achieve your goals. Congratulations, thanks a lot. I'm sure that there will be many questions and curiosity in the room. But before coming into the questions, I would like to ask who wants to be the next one, Everton or Josh? Erika Lucero has just joined us from Brazil. Josh, it is your turn. So I guess that you've been dealing with these transformational aspects, connecting domestic and transnational aspects, sectoral aspects. You've got a great experience, and we would like you to share your experience with us.
Thank you very much, Teresa, and good afternoon to all of you. It's a real pleasure to be here, and what I'm going to tell you is a bit of a variation on what Jochen just told you, because in the EU, and I work in the European Commission, we try to have as common climate policy as possible, for 28 member states. And it's good to see that also Norway, Iceland, and others are joining in. So a good 30 countries are now developing their climate policies together. And we summarized that in the book, EU Climate Policy Explained. It's for free, accessible on our website. We also have a French translation. And since a couple of weeks, we have a translation in Mandarin, in Chinese, all free, accessible on the website. So what is it that we have been doing in the EU? Let me summarize it in 5 points, not more than 5 points. The first is when we were preparing for Paris, and that was in Durban, the idea of the INDCs came up. And the INDCs were always, for us, coupled with a long-term perspective. You cannot optimize up to one single year, not 2020, not 2025, not 2030. You have to have a solid long-term view. And so in the development of the INDCs, we asked a team of economists, engineers, lawyers, you name it, to sit together and to develop an economic modeling that would optimize at least 80% reduction by 2050 for this 30-odd member states together. And these member states are very different in terms of economic development. They are very different in terms of welfare, energy mix, population dynamics. So that was a little bit of a challenge to do that. But we were giving them two constraints. That long-term policy plan needed to be cost-effective, so the cheapest way possible to reach the target, and it had to be based on existing technology. So no fancy things about breakthrough technologies that may come in somewhere half in the period. And we were explicitly also asking them to look at the maximum positive impact on economic growth and on jobs. And I think that is going to increase in importance given the new political situation that we are facing in the EU, in the world, that is that people are looking for jobs. And so in these new technologies, the job creation is much more active than in the old sectors of the economic activity. Energy produced in coal-fired power stations compared to renewables, I think we create 10 times more jobs on average in these new technologies compared to the old technologies. So that was the first element. How can we have cost-effective within existing technologies? And so the result that came on the table, that's my second point, is that by 2030, we should reduce our emissions with at least 40%. And the other elements that were coherent with this is that we should develop at least 27% of our energy through renewable energy sources and at least improve our energy efficiency with 27%. So the three objectives, greenhouse gas emission reductions, at least 40%, and renewable energy and energy efficiency as major drivers was optimized. And now we have enshrined that into our INDC. That's why I'm a great supporter of the INDC concept, because it is about designing economic policies for the future. And we have now formulated, that's the task of the European Commission, to formulate legislation and to put it in front of Parliament and the ministers from the national authorities. So we had a very rational look at things. And that is, I think, despite the economic recession or the low growth rates we are having, that we still continue to debate and to bring that legislation to fruition. Now, the third element is how do we do that? I think that sectorally speaking, we see that the decarbonization of the power sector is the driving force. And by 2030, 1 kilowatt hour in the EU, on average, is going to be generated through renewable energy, which is quite fantastic compared to how fast this sector has been built up and continues to grow thanks to the cost reductions of this technology. Now, another very important element is energy efficiency in buildings, because you build new buildings, but then the performance, the energy performance of the building hangs out for another 30, 50 years. So it's very important that we have that right. And the third element is that we see an electrification of the transport system and of the heating system. So more and more use of electricity, and of course electricity more intensively used through low carbon sources, in particular through renewable energy. Now, in the perspective of 2050, and I think that Jochen already brought that on the table, the main challenge that we still have to get cracking on is the production of energy-intensive commodities. We talk about steel, we talk about cement, we talk about chemicals that are normally very energy and hence very carbon intensive. And having breakthrough technologies on that is absolutely important. And that's why we set aside a big chunk of the revenues from the carbon market to have an innovation fund created, an innovation fund that goes to the industry to innovate in low carbon technology, in particular in those energy intensive commodities, let's say steel, cement, and chemicals. Because let's face it, if you have a windmill is a very clever combination of cement, steel, and chemicals. And so how much we like the windmills, they still have to be produced with raw materials that also should be produced in a low carbon manner. Now, we learned a lot from this. That's my fourth point. We are very eager to share this experience with other people in the world. We do that through IDDRI, and I welcome very much the work that IDDRI was doing. We have tools developed like models from all sorts, internal in the EU, worldwide models, etc. And we have this groundbreaking kind of modeling club of miles on which we are very determined to share with more modelers in the world this kind of tool, which should be the backbone of a rational INDC development. And let me then come to my conclusion, and my fifth point. What did we learn? And that is the message out of the book. A couple of things. The first is getting started with climate policy is the most important. Because if you make plans and plans and plans, you don't get very far. But once you get your first laws into place, you learn better how to do it. And that's why we are beating our targets that we have been setting forward for ourselves. So learning by doing is very important, and we welcome all places in the world who are really covering new policies and new instruments. And one of these is where we have a good experience with in Europe is the carbon market. There is much to be said about the carbon market. We all know that the prices today are far too low, but what the carbon market was doing, it delivered a significant emission reduction at very low cost. And so we are now developing this carbon market tool with other people in the world. We have and develop our contacts with all those experimenting this. But the most important is, of course, the build-up and the nationwide system that is going to be rolled out in China, on which we have been seeing lots of good exchange of information. With South Korea, we do the same. We have good contacts with California, with Quebec, etc. So there is a lot to be learned on carbon markets because it allows to keep the costs low and still deliver the emission reduction. Of course, there is a lot more to say. Sometimes you have scale effects, and that is what we saw in the renewable sector. We had European legislation, and we are determined to continue on renewables with European-wide legislation, because as soon as the market has sufficient scale, the costs are going down very speedily. And that cost reduction, in particular in the field of renewable energy, I think is a very promising element. The more we were developing the market, the demand for this sector, for this equipment, the more the cost per unit went down. And I think that's good news for the future. And for that reason, we are very determined to go into the next phase of our long-term modeling to prepare for our mid-century strategy. That is going to be in slices coming to come on the table, 2018, 2023, the timetable that was agreed in the Paris Agreement. And through that, a constant updating of these tools, I think, is a very important element we want also to engage in. So thank you very much for your attention. And if you are interested, download the book or buy it with the bookshop. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Josh. I could pick this claim to keep long-term thinking in order to provide the right signals to design economic policies for the future, to facilitate this transformation, and to learn the things and the ways to overcome difficulties as some of the main messages you wanted to stress. Our third panelist is Erika Lucero. He's also been engaged in the climate agenda, I don't know, 15 years, lots of years. He comes from Brazil, so quite a different type of challenge. And I think that as the previous speakers, he wants to share with us these lessons being built around this long-term thinking and the opportunities that the low emissions development strategies can provide into this deep transformation. Everton, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with such distinguished panelists and distinguished audience. I apologize for arriving late because I was running from one event to the other, and that happens in this kind of conference. I hope you will all understand. Brazil is very much interested in joining this discussion about a long-term strategy. Not only because it has been mandated by the Paris Agreement for countries to develop their own long-term strategies, but because it is absolutely essential if we are to succeed in implementing the agreement. So the NDCs that all our countries put forward, be it to 2025 or 2030, they should be seen as the starting point, not the ending point. And the starting point of a path that would lead us towards a low-carbon economy in the long run. And that is why it is important for us to start thinking as early as possible. And I am very glad that we have already experiences from Germany, from the EU, as we've heard, on how this planning started. On the other hand, planning is good, but financing is key. And so whenever we want to be successful in implementing any strategy that we plan for, we will have to look at the financial aspect of that. I will give you a brief perspective of how Brazil sees the whole scenario and how we intend to develop further. I must say, however, that at this stage, we are not that far as my previous speakers in developing a long-term national strategy, because we have some homework to do first, before that precisely, to be successful in implementing our NDC, which is ambitious enough. As you are aware, Brazil is perhaps the only big developing country that has adopted a nationwide absolute reduction target by 37% of our emissions until 2025, with an indication of 43% until 2030 in relation to the baseline year of 2005. This is important to consider in the context of development, because, of course, we still are in need of a lot of developments, a lot of demands from our society in terms of better conditions of living, be it in health, education, energy, infrastructure. That is, growth is demanded. It's naturally demanded, and we need to pay attention to that. The key for our approaches and our strategy is to understand that, in fact, the decarbonization in the long run is inevitable, because there's no way of you continue developing at the historic and traditional ways of industrialization and so on, and without being affected by the problem that would, in this case, be each time higher and more difficult to face. So what we see as a challenge is also an opportunity. So the Paris Agreement very clearly brings to us an opportunity of a new path of development that would care for the development needs, that I mentioned in different areas, but at the same time, on a new basis, creating a new economy. And for us to be succeeded in this, it is absolutely essential that climate change is no longer considered as an externality of our economy, but that it is brought to the center of our planning and of our economy authorities and policies. I am very optimistic that Brazil will be able to further develop the agenda along those lines, because we were one of the first big economies to have ratified the Paris Agreement after approval in record time by our National Congress. And this achievement shows that we have a consensus built in the Brazilian society about the urgent need to act in order to mitigate climate change and adapt to its dangerous effects. It means that we understood the dimensions of the problem as a society, with the support of the political element of it. There has not been any single strong substantive questioning of the Paris Agreement while it was being considered by our National Congress, not in relation to the agreement itself, nor in relation to the NDC that we put forward. So this support that we received from our society to the Paris Agreement sends a clear signal also to the international community. So we are ready, we are willing to do our part, we are ready to engage, to contribute to limit the increase in temperature, and we are also open to collaboration, to identification of opportunities for financing, for mobilizing resources from different sources. We understand that the size of the challenge cannot rely only upon the hands of the government itself by reallocating within the national budget those funds that will be enough to implement such bold action that we have to do. No, we need to go beyond that, and precisely we are working now on a strategy that will support the mobilization of capital and from different sources, national and international, bilateral and multilateral, private and public. Because we need to understand once and for all that this agenda came to stay, and we will deliver to it according to our ability to make this huge mobilization of resources. In that regard, it's important also to remind ourselves that the Paris Agreement innovated in this respect by introducing as its core objective in Article 2, not only the limit in the temperature, which is there in the same article, but also the objective of redirecting financial flows towards a low carbon economy in the long run. And that is perhaps the biggest innovation that we haven't fully appropriated ourselves of yet, but we do need to further devote time and effort in order to study the implications and prepare for that. In Brazil, we believe that by putting forward a strong commitment, an ambitious target, we are naturally positioning ourselves to attract partnerships and investments of all these financial flows that the Paris Agreement refers to. So we are indeed committed to creating a low-carbon economy in the long run, and we see the Paris Agreement as an opportunity. I will just conclude by mentioning also that in order to get to a long-term strategy, we believe that there is an important thing to do, and we need the support of the academy, of research institutions, which is on modeling the macroeconomic conditions of the country. Such modeling has been done in Brazil for preparing for the NDC, and I'm glad to say that important projects that involved important research institutes in Brazil are now extending their projects towards 2050 at least, so that they could provide the government and the different stakeholders with this economic modeling of options and economic and social impacts of climate change on the economy and on job creation and so on. So this is one fundamental aspect that I believe that at this initial stage of planning, we need to count on that support. That's why it's so important for us to continue this collaboration and also learn from the experiences of those countries like Germany or regions like the EU, which are already advancing on preparing their long-term strategy. As I said, we are at the moment focusing mainly on the implementation, on a strategy to implement our NDC, but looking at it as a first step to then develop further a long-term strategy. And we want to do that with the participation of all interested stakeholders and with international partners as well. So thank you very much.
So, Everton, I picked two very interesting additional messages. One of them, planning is good, financing is key. And the second thing is that this is an interesting tool. Also, if you take into consideration its capacity to provide a platform for participation in this decision process. I would like to open the floor to the room. But before that, I will leave you with three different questions, one for each. Joachim, first question. I think that what you have shared with us today, it is very important. In this process, one of the most relevant things is building a kind of positive dynamic from getting this additional confidence we need to build. So even in this uncertainty moment, you have taken a step forwards. The adoption of this strategy this morning represents a kind of additional reference for confidence. I would like to develop. I would like you to develop a little bit why you think it matters and how this could be used as a means to help to live with uncertainty in a much more positive way. Josh, you have told us about the mid-century strategies and the preparatory works that you are already in. I would like to develop a little bit. I would like you to develop a little bit more how you think the European Union should use this opportunity of issuing low emissions development strategies by 2020, as stated in the Paris Agreement. Is there room to make something on that? Everton, on this financial aspects, do you think that this long-term thinking, this long-term planning, backcasting scenarios, is a nice tool to provide some additional confidence to identify these financial needs in order to invest where you need to invest? Is it possible to whatever type of country you are thinking of, not just with the big emitters, but useful for anyone? And now I open the floor to the room. So one here, and then we go. Yes, please. Can you introduce yourself when making
Sure,
the
thank
question?
you. My name is Ed King from the Climate Home website. A question to all the panel. Renewables and new technologies may create new jobs, but they offer in different places, different jobs, and for different people. And they're often ones do not offer the same level of community cohesion and respect that old industries offered. And we're seeing now this anger in Brexit, Trump, and maybe in France and Germany next year. So how can these long-term plans address this problem? Or should we accept that in a transition, some people win and some people lose? And can you tell me all an area in Germany, Spain, Brazil, and the EU which has flourished since the end of heavy industry?
There were more people. Yes, please. Can you introduce yourself before asking the question?
Thanks a lot. I'm Maximilian Kuhn. Thanks for the brilliant presentations. I understand that industry, society, and academia needs to have a clear strategy and aims when it comes to climate reduction. So I would like to ask Brasilia, from their experience of using the global temperature potential as an alternative of calculation, its NDCs, if it wouldn't suggest it also to the European Union to use this method, because it fits very well with the NDCs and the national strategies, providing a clearer vision on CO2 reduction. Thanks.
Okay, we pick two more questions and then we go for a second round, please.
Lukas Hamwille from the Wuppertal Institute in Germany. I'm thinking of the transformation implied by a global decarbonization in terms of a process of creative destruction. And we have heard a lot here on the creative part, on the phase-in of renewable energies, on innovation, not only you, but also the preceding side event in this room. But I wonder to what extent also the dark side of this creative destruction is reflected in the German long-term strategy and also in other long-term strategies. And also maybe to challenge you to think out of the box a bit. Given that we are here under the umbrella of the United Nations, what actually can international cooperation offer in this regard, managing the decline of unsustainable technologies and practices?
Okay, go ahead.
My name is Bärbel Höhn. I have a question to the EU Commission because I think after Paris Agreement, we have to change our long-term goals. And the EU has a goal of 40% in 2030, and I think that's not enough. What will you do to change your goal? Because we now reached in the EU level 24%, so more than 2020, you know, than we had to reach in 2020. And so it's not very ambitious. You would like to reach only 40% to 2030. So I think we must do more, because if we have emission neutral situation in 2050, that's not enough to have 40% in 2030.
And there was a last question, I think.
Thank you very much. My name is Kentaro Tamura from IGES. I have two questions to the political process of German cases. So regarding this long-term goal, virtually almost GHG neutral by 2050. So how does government reach that kind of very ambitious goal? I mean, creating political and social acceptance of such concept. That's one question. And also second question is, you said setting sectoral target is one of the most difficult tasks. So how did you reach this consensus or political agreement among different sectors regarding how to split that target among sectors? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Who wants to start? You.
Okay. So, well, I can, I think I can answer most of the question inclusively, because they more or less addressed the same problem or area. One thing you said, Teresa, that we have chosen a positive way to organize this. I mean, I have to say, my experience over the last week were not completely positive. Sometimes they were really painful. And I think that is a kind of debate you have to have in a society. We are talking really about a big transformation. And addressing this on an intellectual level, as I said, with textbook wisdom, you will not be able to achieve people. We know that the net balance in an economy, I said it, is positive. We are sure that it will be positive for us, and that is the way how we address this. But this doesn't mean immediately that with such an approach you reach the people. Sometimes you even don't reach ministers. And so these are things you have to discuss. And just one or two examples. Number one is when we started the process 2 years ago in Germany, also on a level where we have skillful people, politicians, I heard many times that also after 2050, even after 2050, in Germany, we will use a lot of coal. I haven't heard that during the last weeks anymore. People sometimes feel uncomfortable if they're making their business with coal and fossils. Sometimes those ministers who have to deal with economics and to have, in a way, to protect these kind of industry don't feel immediately comfortable with our approaches. But at least now it's fully understood that coal is a story that will be over before 2050. This is understood. And that is, you have to go through these debates, and they are not always positive. Sometimes they are very, very negative. Another example is the question of mobility. In the first draft of our plan, we said that after 2030, we should or might forbid fossil-driven cars. And the debate exploded in Germany. I mean, we have a lot of car industry. It's very relevant for our economy. So this was a way to look at it, that people said, well, you can't transform in such a speedy way. And now we have weaker language in our plan, yes, that's true. But when I debate with the industry, they tell me, well, we have understood the message. We know that we have to go into this direction. We know that other countries like China are investing in e-mobility, leaving behind the fossil-driven car industry in old Europe. So sometimes it takes time. It's not, you're not immediately there. And now it's very important, and that was the question, how to create at least a minimum consensus on that. And my answer is, start early. The later you start, the more difficult it will be. If you want to avoid structural disruption, then you have to start in a time that you can organize the transformation in a way that you also have a look into individual jobs, that people will not lose their jobs because you have time enough for this kind of transformation. And a last word on this one. I'm coming in Germany from an area in my hometown where we were completely dependent on coal and steel in the 70s when I was a boy. And what we did, maybe not in a perfect manner in Germany, but at least we did it. We organized the structural changes there. We still have industry in this region. We have different industry. It's more IT driven than it was in the past with coal and steel, but we organize it. And that is something, this is not done by markets. You need a strong government. You need to direct the system into a new area. And if you just close industry and companies without having a look what will follow afterwards, then you get a political atmosphere where people have the tendency to follow the easy messages, the easy and very often illiberal messages we are seeing in the world everywhere at the moment.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yes, now it is. Okay, well, I think there was a talk about disruption. And I think that it is the task of policymakers to manage disruption. And this long-term tools is a very essential tool where three elements have to converge. The first is time, because it's always, reality is always a gradual process, but you have to be able to tell people where you are going. So the long-term vision must be clarified. And that is clarified step by step. So I think that is where the tools of this long-term planning is very helpful for. It makes explicit the gradual process and the vision where you are going. The second is that you need a regulation that is well thought through and that is kept. We all talked about the renewable energy. What we have, if there is something to criticize in the EU, is that sometimes the regulations and the incentive schemes of the member states were erratic. And something was promised and then was called back and changed en cours de route. So the regulation has to be clear and stable. And third is you need finance. If your regulation is clear and stable, the private sector jumps. But the disruptive elements of the process need also public finance. And that is what we actively are doing in the EU. We have a third of even more of the budget of the EU is about funding for regional development. And this funding for regional development is about management of the process of change that is about to be brought along your regulations. And that goes into retraining of people, new investments that have to be done, etc., etc. So it's an art. It's not easy, because you have to put a lot of noses in the same direction to have the acceptance of the timing, the acceptance of the regulation, the acceptance of the finance, private as well as public. But I think there are good examples of how this was done. On the question of the long-term goals of the EU, that they are not good enough for 2030, well, I can tell you, when I'm in Council and Parliament, I know that we are stretching for now the limits of what is possible. But I'm hopeful, because what we studied in our book, and that is our experience of the last 10, 15 years, once you are started and once you are along the way, then you have the conditions to tighten up one or the other element. So I'm hopeful that we are going to get there, that we are going to beat our targets massively in 2030. But at the same time, today it is about developing that regulation. And for that, you need a qualified majority. You do not just need half of the population plus one. You need 80% of the people to accept the change and to put it in legislation. And if the legislation is not delivered, also to have the compliance checks related to that. So I would qualify the fact that we can do more by about 40%. There is a democratic process that one needs to manage. And I think with the 40% that we are currently putting in legislation, we are well on track. It is challenging, it's doable. We are going to get there without disrupting people that may the day after turn around entirely against the project that you wanted to have adopted. Thank you.
Well, starting with your question, Teresa, on the long-term thinking, if it provides confidence to investments and to the market, I would say yes. I would say that it is actually essential to have such long-term thinking in place. Because what is required by capital, by investments, risk reduction, previsibility, and liquidity. I mean, if we are able to use the financial engineering that we might use to devise models of business that would consider these alternatives, these specific requests from the private sector and from the capital, we would be, and we include that in a long-term perspective, we are on the right track to provide the confidence that is needed in the investments. That's why it is actually a matter of financial engineering, and I stress the need to bring together the financial world with us when planning for the long run. On the question of one area that has flourished in my country, Ed mentioned here, I would refer, well, I could have some examples, but I would focus on one particular, which is that of biofuels. As you know, Brazil has one of the biggest and most successful biofuel programs, including cogeneration of electricity using biomass. And we included in our NDC the goal of increasing the share of sustainable biofuels in the Brazilian energy mix to approximately 18% by expanding the biofuel consumption, increasing ethanol supply, including advanced biofuels, that is the second generation or cellulosic ethanol, and also increasing the share of biodiesel in the diesel mix over time. Now, at this COP here in Marrakesh, we are launching a biofuture platform with over 20 countries as partners that is expected to be seen as a multi-stakeholder platform for governments, for the private sector, for international funding organizations to join efforts in promoting further the contribution of biofuels and the bioeconomy as well to the goals of the Paris Agreement. This, by the way, will be launched at the Moroccan Pavilion on Wednesday at 5 p.m. For those who are interested, our Minister of Environment, Sarney Filho, will be present for that event. On the GTP question, well, I'm sure that you are aware of the Brazilian position that GTP provides a more accurate picture of emissions if we consider that our goal is set in terms of temperature limit and not in terms of emission. This is in many ways a better tool to be used as an indicator. So we continue supporting GTP. We preferred at our NDC to provide data based on GWP because we wanted it to be comparable. But we also provided some indication of how it would translate into GTP. And it is particularly important for us to achieve goals that we have set for ourselves in the agriculture sector and waste disposal and treatment. Therefore, our position actually hasn't changed from before COP21. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any additional question coming from the room? Please, there.
Hello, I'm the Regional Advisor for Climate Change at UNESCAP. We have 53 member states in the Asia-Pacific region. And you know, what's in it for them? I mean, should they be all pursuing these low emission development strategies? It'd be interesting to hear your views on this. Thank you.
Okay, please go ahead. Everton, do you want to answer that question?
Well, based on our experience, what I would say is that there is a fundamental aspect for any party, any country, to develop a long-term strategy, which is to be convinced internally among the stakeholders that there is no other way today to seek development. So if we bring together the 2030 agenda of the UN, the Sustainable Development Objectives, the SDGs, we will have an agenda of development that will require necessarily attention to climate. And then you would have a justification to introduce a long-term, low-carbon strategy. This is absolutely essential. Without being convinced that this is the way forward, and being convinced, I mean, including the different stakeholders within each country. It would be difficult to just create plans and then promote them without the support. We need to engage the engagement of society, the support of society as a fundamental principle to move forward.
Yes, the experience we have in the EU, after all, we are, as I said, 28 member states, very different. So if we have the same long-term vision, but we allow for differentiation, that's absolutely critical, because you have member states, in our case, where you have a lot of geothermal, while other member states have none. You have member states with a lot of sun and a lot of wind energy. You have member states with none. So every single member state is different. We have member states who are very heavily still relying on coal. And they have a long-term transformation process they have to go through. So we have to manage that. But I think when you have the same vision and you allow for differentiation, you can do a lot together, including inducing the scale effects that you need to bring the costs of the new technology down.
Okay, so thank you so much. Laurence Tubiana seems to be trapped in a consultation with parties on this champion's role. But I would like to wrap up a little bit with some key messages that I think that we have been hearing. It's true that I make some cherry picking when wrapping up, but I would say that if this is a difficult exercise where we need participation because we are convinced about the sense of direction, but we don't know how to do that, we need to open that discussion in a smartly guided manner. So policymakers should be leading this discussion, understanding that this is a participatory discussion on how we want to build the future, first thing. Second thing, if this provides a good reference to facilitate people to take decisions, including those willing to invest and willing to avoid any waste of money in things that would not return as previously expected in the years to come. This is, again, a way to facilitate things to happen in the right manner, to combine the long-term thinking with the short-term pressures. And finally, if what we need to build in the years to come is manners, ways to provide responses to the answer on how we can cover that gap, how we can bridge that gap that came out from the previous NDCs being submitted in Paris. And if we have envisaged something called stocktake exercise, this long-term thinking would also provide some good cases to understand where the other opportunities may be. So we know that we have to live with many uncertainties. We have to open our minds in a way that accepts flexibilities for the year to come, but also we need to build some sound assessment on what type of scenarios and combination of tools we could be providing in order to achieve the goals without giving the impression that this is just a simple exercise given to the market where there could be losers and winners, because that could be the worst type of answer we could provide to those fearing the transformation we need to put in place. So thanks a lot. I'm sure that we will hear much about this type of long-term thinking and not long-term, tools for transformation in this long-term thinking and combinations between the domestic priorities and approaches towards the common global goals. Thanks a lot. And again, not fossil fuel price for, not fossil awards for the time being, no, for Germany. Thanks. Congratulations.